Coaching transitions don't necessarily spell successful recruiting classes, as coaches need to step onto campus, oversee the lay of the land, get comfortable, and try to retain a recruiting class that was formed and established and the relationships built by a former regime. But Brent Pry, coming from Penn State to Virginia Tech, has apparently done about as well as anyone could possibly expect. We got Mike McDaniel on the line. You can catch his work on Sons of Saturday, also his National College Football podcast there on Sons of Saturday, as well as the Basketball Conference podcast. Hey, Mike.
What's going on?
Not too much. How you doing?
Good. You mentioned, it's always kind of a crapshoot with, transition recruiting class. And, I try to caution people just in general, not just Virginia Tech fans, but any fan base, that it's really hard to come in right around the time of the early national signing day with the way things are currently structured in college football. Having the early signing day in mid-December, it's really hard to come in as a new coach and establish relationships with guys you may or may not be familiar with that were targets with a prior coach, right? And establish months or years worth of relationships in a span of 2.5 weeks, which is what Brent Pry had to do. There were some decommitments. There were also some flips in this class to Virginia Tech. So, all in all, for Virginia Tech to be sitting here with the 30th ranked national class in 24/7 sports after firing a coach and not having the entire coaching staff in place yet, I think a lot of Virginia Tech fans would have taken it.
Yeah, just let that sink in, folks. When you really consider moving from another job, another part of the country, doing all the things that are required of a coach, going from, in this case, a defensive coordinator spot at Penn State, going to Virginia. He has ties there. Check out the post that Mike and Paul did on the hiring of Brent Pry right here on the Virginia Tech channel that really talks about Pry's experience, his ties to Virginia. So there is some groundwork laid there, but nothing close to what is established by coaches across the country that you're competing against, who have established, again, as Mike says, relationships over months and years with these student athletes. So at number 4 in the ACC and number 30 nationally, that's pretty impressive. So what was some of the late breaking news in that final 24 to 48 hours, those hits and misses?
Yeah, so a lot happened. Now, it's not uncommon for this to happen in any recruiting class, but especially one that's transitioning from one coach to another, as late as Virginia Tech's was. And Virginia Tech hires Brent Pry late November timeframe, and he hit the ground running on the recruiting trail and tried to retain as much of this class as he could, and he did a really nice job of that. But there were some flips away from Virginia Tech. So a couple here. Ramon Brown, he was a 4-star running back from the Richmond area in Virginia. And one thing we've talked on the show before, Mark, is, we've talked about Justin Fuente and the struggles that they've had recruiting the state of Virginia, right, under his staff. And it started to get better. As you can see with this class, a lot of the guys that they were able to retain were guys that Justin Fuente recruited. So there was more of a priority put on Virginia, albeit a little bit too late for Justin Fuente. But Ramon Brown was one of those guys at running back, 4-star running back, actually had Penn State on his offer list. So Brent Pry was familiar with Ramon Brown, and took an in-home visit with him about a week and a half ago. A lot of schools went and tried to talk to Ramon Brown late in the process. West Virginia, Maryland, and Maryland ultimately is where he flipped his commitment the night before National Signing Day. So he flipped. It wasn't a huge surprise to me. Now, this is a very talented kid, a guy that Virginia Tech would love to keep from the Richmond area, an area where Brent Pry has made clear they're going to prioritize a lot of talent in the Richmond area in Virginia. So to lose Ramon Brown there was tough. But if you're going to have it happen to one position, have it happen to running back, where Virginia Tech has over-recruited in the past several years. They have almost too many running backs on the roster at this point in time. So, it sucks to have to lose Ramon Brown to Maryland the night before signing day. But being able to get a guy in Bryce Duke, who is a mid-tier 3-star prospect, but a very good player, accounted for almost 3,000 all-purpose yards, was named All-Met in the DC metro area, which is a huge deal, Mark, in the DMV. Like, to be named All-Met by the Washington Post, to be the best player in the area is a really big deal. And to do it at Tuscarora High School, which is not a traditional powerhouse in the high school ranks in Virginia, always a decent program, but not like a known power. To be able to pull that off at Tuscarora, account for almost 3,000 all-purpose yards. Kid's a ball player and a guy that Virginia Tech will be able to rely on at running back. Not to get too long-winded, but quarterback position has hurt Virginia Tech a lot. Alex Orjai was a Texas quarterback, high 3-star by 24/7. He flipped to Michigan. So that's a tough loss for Virginia Tech for a position of need. That's a more pressing issue for Virginia Tech than losing running back Ramon Brown, just because we know what Virginia Tech's issues have been at quarterback this past year and really the past couple of years. So that one hurt. But Virginia Tech was able to flip a few guys back to kind of ease the blow, so to speak. I mean, Brody Meadows, an offensive tackle, you flip him from UVA. Keyshawn Burgos, a defensive lineman, you flip him from UVA. Brody Meadows, high 3-star. Burgos is a mid-tier 3-star, but anytime you can steal 2 in-state guys in Virginia from UVA, that's significant to Virginia Tech. And the Hokies have signed officially so far 12 guys, with a 13th incoming from the state of Virginia. Malachi Madison is from Virginia as well. He's not officially on the list of signees yet. He has signed his letter of intent, but something going on with his dad using the GI Bill to pay for his college. So it's not officially counted in the national letters of intent, from what I understand, but he has signed as well, and he would be number 13 once that's all made official. So a couple flips either direction, and one other guy Virginia Tech is pursuing in state is Xavion Bradshaw, who's deciding between Vanderbilt and Virginia Tech. He's actually just announced that he'll make his decision tomorrow, so he's taking a few extra days to think about it.
Maybe somebody should have a conversation with him and let him know he's going to lose every game by 50 points in the SEC. May not experience that for 4 years.
No, great.
20 letters of intent. Do we expect too much activity for the rest of the week? Players can obviously sign through Friday and then on into February.
Yeah, so Xavion Bradshaw is the one that's going to sign imminently. Going to make his decision. So he actually announced yesterday. Virginia Tech made a really late push for him. This was not a guy that Justin Fuente was heavily pursuing. This is a Brent Pry signee in Xavion Bradshaw. Talented kid, Mark. Like, talented kid. He's a 3-star, but a really good player. A kid that plays kind of hybrid running back, slot receiver position. If you're familiar with watching Virginia Tech, it's more of for the listeners, not you, Mark, but for the listeners and the viewers, kind of like the Raheem Blackshear role, where he's kind of splitting out wide in the slot, playing a little bit of running back as well. A little bit different from what his dad did with the Giants, right? So a little bit different type of player, but very talented. And Virginia Tech made a really late push, and now it's between the Hokies and Vanderbilt to earn his commitment. I would be pretty surprised if Virginia Tech wasn't able to land him. Couple other guys who probably will not be signing by this Friday, but will be guys to keep an eye on for February. Tight end Daquan Wright out of Perry, Georgia, high 3-star, and then Xavier Chaplin from South Carolina, 6'6", 350-pound tackle, another mid-tier 3-star. So, guys that are talented that are still just kind of evaluating the options and kind of want to see what the offensive staff is. But Virginia Tech got their commitments early in the recruiting process. I think Virginia Tech will be able to at least land one of those 2 guys.
Yeah, Daquan Wright, the 247 Sports crystal ball pointing in the Hokies' direction there. And we got Mike McDaniel on the line. Catch his podcast on Sons of Saturday, the National College Football Podcast right there, and also his basketball conference podcast. Not to be confused, not a basketball podcast, basketball conference podcast with our guy Joey Weaver as well. Brent Pry, we're going to obviously know more once we get to spring practice, see the team on the field through August camp, see schematic differences, that sort of thing. But when it comes solely to recruiting, may be difficult to assess at this point. He's done a tremendous job retaining and also adding to what is the 2022 class. Do you see any kind of, based on what he was able to accomplish, based on what's come out of his mouth, any differences in approach?
Well, yeah, I mean the clear one is the prioritization of Virginia in recruiting, something that Justin Fuente kind of went hot and cold on in his 6 years in Blacksburg. At first, he came into a press conference. Justin Fuente did that, back in late 2015. His introductory press conference, he talked about recruiting Virginia, and he did it for a couple of years, then started kind of recruiting all over the place. And the bottom line is he didn't really establish the relationships needed with a lot of the schools in Virginia that have been a priority with Frank Beamer at the helm in the past. Brent Pry is more cut from the Frank Beamer mold in that respect, where, he was a GA under Beamer and Bud Foster. So he knows, and he's from Virginia, right? So he knows how important it is to recruit the state and what the state of Virginia means to recruiting at a school like Virginia Tech. So the prioritization of the state of Virginia, I think, is going to be the clear break between him and Justin Fuente. I think it'll be consistent. I think that the signing class, even though it's, a lot of these guys, like I mentioned, were Justin Fuente commits, the fact he was able to keep those guys and now he's looking to add a couple more, and he flipped some guys, and it's just clear that they're going to try to make an impact in state because there is a lot of talent in Virginia. Like, nobody's going to pretend that Virginia is Florida or California or Texas even. But if you're making a list of top 7 or 8, states in the United States where high school football is the most talented, right? Most talented states in the country, Virginia is up there. I mean, Virginia is a top 5 to 10. They're probably in that range. So a lot of talent in state, a lot of guys who are playing big time football at other schools, and Virginia Tech can try to keep home. I mean, Clemson, Florida State, Miami, Alabama, like they're pulling kids out of Virginia regularly. You look at the last few years, you look at the top 10 to 15 prospects in the state of Virginia, and you look at where they've gone. There's no reason why Virginia Tech can't get, at least 4 or 5 of the guys in the top 10 in Virginia. That's what they had always done prior to Fuente. So I don't think anybody's expecting Brent Pry to come in and get all 10 of the top prospects and get 5-star, if you got 2 or 3 5-stars in a class out of Virginia. I don't think anybody's expecting Brent Pry to nab all 3 of those guys, but maybe pick off one every couple of years, maybe consistently get 4-stars from Virginia to commit to Virginia Tech like he used to. That would be a really good start, something that Justin Fuente was not doing.
Traditionally, out of the top 300 to 500 players in the nation, California, Texas, and Florida produce 40% of them. It's just off the charts ridiculous. Georgia's made a huge move in recent years in becoming just a football-laden state, even overtaking in some categories California for 3rd place. I'm looking at a map right now that's running down top 500 recruits. Ohio gets a ton of respect. It's not what it used to be decades ago, but it gets a ton of respect as being on that next layer. Virginia has as many top 500 players as Ohio. It's in the top 7 or 8 in the country.
Yeah, so you're any given year you're in that 5 to 10 range, and somewhere in the middle, and there's a lot of talent. And when you see these kids going to Clemson and going to North Carolina, like UNC, I didn't mention them a minute ago, but UNC's had a ton of success coming into Virginia and poaching Virginia Tech guys. And it was pretty funny because when Justin Fuente first got to Blacksburg, he was primarily recruiting Virginia and North Carolina. And so those were some of his best recruiting classes, snagging the talent out of the state of Virginia and neighboring North Carolina, taking them from UNC, something that Mac Brown has done now in the latter half of Justin Fuente's tenure, and something that Brent Pry is going to try to shut off, I'm sure.
I'm going to guarantee that Ohio State has plucked a couple players out of Virginia.
Travion Henderson. Oh, yeah. Travion Henderson, ball player.
All right, talking Virginia Tech, we got Mike McDaniel on the line. We always lean on him for Hokie talk. He and Paul Van Wagner doing our pregame and postgame for Virginia Tech, and, of course, a bowl game coming up against Maryland. And this certainly falls into a benefit or advantage for a new coach that can walk into a program where at least they made a bowl game. He can get those players on the field and see them working out for the first time for what? I think it's 15 sessions, something in that range.
Right.
So that has to be an advantage to obviously just the prestige, not necessarily we know what's happened to the perception of certain bowl games, but at the same time, people say, did you make a bowl game? You didn't even make a bowl game. That seems to be a threshold for one thing in regards to perception out there. But then again, it's just being able to get the athletes on the field, get to work and see them before you get to spring practice.
Yeah, and it's a low bar to clear for a program that generally schedules at least one FCS opponent and plays in the weaker of the two divisions in the Coastal, right? So, and the ACC. So, yeah, I mean, you hope annually Virginia Tech can at least make a bowl game. And, you know, prior to the last few years, that was never even something that anybody questioned. It was whether or not Virginia Tech was going to win 9, 10, 11 games. That was the question, not is Virginia Tech going to be battling it out in the Commonwealth Cup against UVA at the end of the year to make a bowl game. That's been an issue for Virginia Tech now a couple different times over the last 5 or 6 years. So something that Virginia Tech will want to improve upon. It's going to take a couple of years because Virginia Tech is losing a pretty decent amount of talent off this past team that was barely able to make a bowl game. And I do think there's talent on the roster. Was the talent always utilized in the best way? No. And Fuente and his staff had issues recruiting, but that was only one part of the equation. So it'll be interesting to see, you know, can Brent Pry and his staff get more out of the guys who are left over from Justin Fuente, and, you know, can they build on it in recruiting, which I would hope the answer to both of those is yes.
And again, you and Paul got together to evaluate in a number of areas, but the Brent Pry hiring. So in a nutshell, what was your initial response? And now that you've had a couple of weeks to let it soak in, and based on what your expectations of what that job should bring, and what is the fan base's response? Because typically there's this thought that, okay, we got to bring in somebody we known as a known commodity that's been the head coach somewhere where we can see a record next to their name.
Yeah. The one other thing I try to caution with fans is, like, just because you're not too familiar and he's not in the top 5 list of names that some website put up, doesn't mean he's not any good, right?
Yep.
So I think that's what we were running into with Brent Pry. You know, some fans were like, oh, he's not Matt Campbell, which sounds outrageous that Virginia Tech would be able to pluck Matt Campbell away from Iowa State. But that was a pretty hefty rumor on the message boards a couple of days before Brent Pry was hired. You know, oh, that's not Charles Huff, the first-year head coach at Marshall. Like, who are we hiring? That's not Luke Fickell. That's not, I mean, just name a guy from a list. You know, that's not Billy Napier. It's like, no, it's not. It's Brent Pry, a guy who played high school football and college football, you know, in and around the state of Virginia, a guy who worked at Virginia Tech under Frank Beamer and Bud Foster, a guy who's had a ton of success as a recruiter in the state of Virginia when he was at Penn State, you know, plucking kids out of Northern Virginia, another school that's had a lot of success in Virginia that shouldn't be having as much success as they are, right? So you think about that. He's a Virginia Tech guy, right? He's a cultural fit. You know, when you watch the introductory press conference, the two things that are different, or the one thing that's clearly different between the two guys, Fuente and Brent Pry, is that Brent Pry understands Virginia Tech coming in much better than Justin Fuente did, right? For Fuente, it was, okay, this is my first big job. For Brent Pry, it's like, okay, I have coached here before. It was 25 years ago, but I've coached here before. This is where I got my start in coaching. The place means a lot to him because of that, right? So the cultural fit is huge. The understanding of recruitment is huge, and building and bettering the culture is important. It's been clear, and again, it's all about wins and losses at the end of the day, Mark, but he's checking a lot of boxes from vanity boxes, so to speak, right, that a head coach has outside of X's and O's and on-field production. He's checking the boxes of reaching out to the fan base. He's checking the boxes of, you know, being more open to the media. You know, Virginia Tech's video team has been putting out, you know, incredible recruiting videos and you know, reactions to guys signing. You know, Virginia Tech offered an offensive tackle yesterday that was a teammate of their top signee, Gunnar Gibbons, a kid who's a 3-star who Justin Fuente had on his radar, had him as a preferred walk-on. And Hunter McLean was his name, from Lord Botetourt High School. And McLean had committed verbally to Richmond. Pretty good program at the FCS level. And Brent Pry called him yesterday morning, the morning of National Signing Day, and told him they were offering a full scholarship. So he flipped his commitment to the Hokies. And the Virginia Tech media team recorded that call and put it on social media. And it sounds silly, but like Virginia Tech was not doing that under Justin Fuente. And that's something that the fan base, reaching out to the fan base and understanding that part of it is important. So Brent Pry gets all that. I like it more and more every day. There were guys that were rumored to be potential hires that, we had questions about. Brent Pry certainly had not being a head coach before. That's something that is inherent. That's a question, right? How is he going to handle being the head guy? But, being able to retain a lot of these top recruits and being able to flip a few guys in state. And he's had a really good opening 3 weeks as Virginia Tech's head coach.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it. I know what it takes to evaluate a coach coming in and building a program, but you know Virginia Tech from a cultural standpoint, from a functional standpoint.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it's been a good hire. And the first indication from the metrics is, wow, the 30th ranked class in the country, considering he comes in 2 weeks prior to National Signing Day, and the 4th rated class in the conference.
And he lost, 2 4-stars, or a 4-star and a high 3-star yesterday. But then he flips like 2 3-stars, and they got another 3-star in Xavier Bradshaw on their radar. And, there's just, this just feels a bit different, Mark. Like the last few recruiting classes have not been very good for Virginia Tech under Justin Fuente, like inexcusably bad for the school that Virginia Tech is. Virginia Tech under Frank Beamer, never had worse than a top 30 class. They were consistently in the top 30. And for Justin Fuente to have like the 76th rated recruiting class for 2020, and then for 2021 to have a class in the 40s, it's like, okay, that was an improvement, but like Virginia Tech should have never fallen to that, because even with Beamer, like the last few years of Beamer were not very good. Like last 4 years, they were averaging 7.5 wins per year under Frank Beamer. So it's not like the production on the field was great, right? But the one thing we can say during that time is they were still recruiting pretty well. They were still recruiting Virginia well. They were still putting out top 30 classes, which is pretty reasonable at Virginia Tech. And it's reasonable that given the talent in Virginia that we mentioned, Virginia Tech could be better than that, right? They have not done it, Mark. They've never put out a top 20 class, right, in the modern rankings era. But I think that's reasonable to expect given the talent in Virginia. I don't think it's an unreasonable ask to say, can Virginia Tech put out top 20 recruiting classes? North Carolina's doing it. Virginia Tech, from a football standpoint and a resources standpoint, they have everything they need to compete against North Carolina, right? There's no reason why Virginia Tech can't make a similar jump that North Carolina made. So I think that's the ask here. It's, can they improve recruiting, and can they improve player development and on-field production, because they kind of lost their way in both regards as a football program under Justin Fuente.
With the talent in the state and with the talent in the region, the DMV, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, it's a good region for football talent.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So we'll have to see what happens.
Mike McDaniel, Sons of Saturday's National College Football Podcast, and also, of course, his Basketball Conference Podcast with Joey Weaver. Mike, we appreciate you stopping by. Would like to reel you back in before the Maryland Bowl game matchup and talk some more Hokie football.
Yeah, for sure, Mark. Appreciate it.